Yeah.
Would you feel sort of like a, look, I've got to continue because of the platform we've been given and for Andy's sake, or would you feel comfortable stepping away?
Hey, friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And you're watching Tom Talks Rubbish.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and stand back for another interview. This time, I'm joined by Dan from the Tea and Tights podcast. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So if we take us back to the beginning, where do you first discover wrestling?
It would have been in 1988 when a friend of mine showed me a WWE magazine.
Okay. How do you know how he or they connected to the magazine at all?
I do. They got taken by their dad to go and see some live shows, and I'd seen ITV wrestling. That had always been on in the background on Saturdays when I was younger. I'd always enjoyed watching it, and I remember transitioning and starting to see some of the WCW stuff. I remember seeing the Beverly Brothers. They were ones that sort of really stood out to me. And then, this wrestling magazine got passed around, and I saw pictures of Earthquake and Jake the Snake, and it was just like, there's nothing like this that I've seen before.
Mm-hmm. So with it being sort of the 80s and the larger-than-life character era, how do you think you would find wrestling today if you got into it as a kid, today's wrestling with no prior knowledge? And then what about if we flip the question and you got into wrestling, 80s wrestling at the age you are now with no prior knowledge?
I think this is why I'm still always drawn to character wrestlers. I think that's why I still love people like Danhausen. I like seeing sort of the big artificial characters that come through. One of my favourite things ever was Finn Balor's Demon. I just thought absolutely brilliant. So I think there is a lack of the characters in wrestling, but infinitely better wrestling to watch, more technical, more high flying, just more of the wrestling to attract you as opposed to the character. So I think it's now the character isn't as necessary because the moves and the actual quality of wrestling is there to take it over.
Mm-hmm. So if you had to pick, would you rather a wrestler that has, I don't want to say bad wrestling skills, but like limited wrestling skills and more character, or would you want today's wrestling of maybe better wrestling skills and less of a character?
Oh, that's a tough one. That is a proper tough one. I have a regular discussion with my friend Stephen about this because I really like Chris Ridgway and he finds Chris Ridgway boring. He really likes Charles Crowley for the entertainment side, and I like Charles Crowley because he's got the entertainment and he can still do the wrestling. So I think if I had to make the choice, oh God, Andy's going to hate me, but I want characters. I want people that I can connect with. So yeah, I think I would go for character over skill. And we had this argument the other day about Big Daddy, whether Big Daddy should be on the British top 10 wrestlers of all time.
He's not for me personally.
No, and that's exactly what Andy says as well. But I argue this point and say, entertainment-wise, he drew millions of people, millions and millions, most recognisable face in the UK in the late 70s, early 80s. How can you not have someone with that kind of input and that kind of recognition on your top 10?
True. You've helped me realise something today. That's very true. I think for me, it's the sort of thing I've only seen his, let's call a spade, his crap WCW run. Do you know what I mean? I've only seen that. So if I saw some of his earlier work, I might feel a bit different. Do you know what I mean?
No, his earlier work was crap as well, but it's just for the pure entertainment side of it. Okay.
So from like 1998 to how much wrestling were you consuming once you discovered these magazines, or was it purely through the magazines themselves?
I didn't get a lot until my dad got a satellite TV. And then I started watching Raw when Raw first became Raw.
So that would be January 93?
Round about then.
I think.
That would make sense. And then I started watching Raw a lot. And then later on, I started watching. I never got WCW because I never stayed up late to watch it. But then Bravo started running ECW, and I completely fell in love with ECW. Started getting videos, started getting more and more into that. So I was a big ECW fan as well.
What was it that drew you in to ECW? Was it the violence, or was it the different type of presentation?
It was the presentation, and it was the characters, because at this point, Raw had moved on to great characters with sort of Stone Cold, The Rock, Ken Shamrock, Goldust. Loved Goldust. Mm-hmm. But ECW still had some of the bigger characters. And I think it was that drew me in. And because it was a completely different product to what I'd seen before.
Okay. So when basically, if we move on to the end of 2001, and basically WWE is pretty much the only game in town at this point.
Yep.
How does your wrestling fandom change at that point?
It wanes.
Okay.
I still watched it occasionally, but it became an occasional. It became a sort of like a once a month or once every couple of months, as opposed to definitely once a week, definitely watching everything. It was more of the wrestling's on, I'll pop that on.
Oh, okay. Did it become sort of a I'm bored, I'm scrolling through channels thing rather than a I make this part of my viewing week, if you know.
Well, it also became a point that during this time, I had 2 children. I was working a 9-to-5 job, and I was DJing 4 nights a week. So it was a case of there wasn't time either. So the time that I did have was very limited, and that's why I enjoyed it. Still being able to, I wasn't following it, but it was my downtime. I was still able to enjoy my wrestling.
I totally get what you mean. So how do you come back as a full-time fan then?
Oh, that would be the summer of Punk.
Okay, so you had about 10 years where you would consider yourself a casual fan?
Yeah, I'd still consider myself a casual fan. I'd still say that I enjoyed wrestling. I still read lots of wrestling biographies. But yeah, I would only count myself as a casual fan at that point. But then, yeah, Summer of Punk drew me back in.
I can guess what it was, but do you want to elaborate on what it was that drew you in?
It was lordsofpain.net, the website. And I was following and reading everything that was going on. It's like, oh, this actually sounds really exciting. And then I saw Punk wrestling and really enjoyed the way he wrestled. I really enjoyed the way he interviewed. Mm-hmm. And then the pipe bomb was just mind-blowing.
Do you remember the first Punk match you saw?
Possibly against Rey Mysterio off the top of my head. I think, but I'm not 100% sure.
Was that on a pay-per-view or was that on Raw?
No, it would have just been a standard Raw match.
I think I know when you're talking about, but I don't want to throw dates out there because I get gutted in the comments because I get them wrong. But anyway,
yeah, I'm pretty sure that's who it was.
So you've discovered Punk at this time. How does that change your fandom?
Well, it was a case of going back to watching regularly, and I also started watching TNA again because TNA had become more accessible in the UK. And then I started doing some research. I heard about the Samoa Joe CM Punk matches that had happened in Ring of Honor. Mm-hmm. So I went back and I watched those and was just thinking I hadn't seen wrestling like this since ECW with Tajiri and those kind of guys that were doing the faster paced, harder hitting matches in ECW, and I was really enjoying those. And then I started watching Raw a lot more, and I started following things. And then I was a proper wrestling fan again, enjoying it and watching what I could. Because I do have a ridiculously busy life.
So I appreciate you taking the time to do this, by the way.
This is cool. You caught me on a good day. It's been today. I'm getting things ready because I'm actually doing sound for a wrestling show tomorrow in Birmingham. So I'm getting all of my equipment ready and sorted out to go up and do PEW's New Beginnings show.
Ooh.
Yes, looking forward to that. So yeah, really enjoyed getting into the wrestling again. And then it wasn't until lockdown really that I started getting more into British wrestling. I'd seen a few live shows, but that's when I started getting properly into the British wrestling scene.
Was this might sound like a very stupid question, was this live wrestling, or was this stuff that you were being sent and like, check this out if you're bored sort of thing?
I'd been to 4 live shows. A couple of them were sort of holiday camp ones prior to lockdown. And I'd taken my son to watch SmackDown at the O2. And so I'd seen a few live shows. And then I started getting sent Progress and Ring of Honor stuff. And Rev Pro and some ICW, and it was just like, there is this amazing high quality wrestling, high quality production UK scene that I don't know enough about.
Okay, so does this sort of become like, we all had one, this was one, did this sort of become like your lockdown project then, to sort of discover more?
Yeah, it was discover more. Basically, one of my friends wanted to start doing a geeky podcast, Stephen, because we were in a Facebook group called the Big Fat Geek Life, and there's about 100 of us who regularly chat and share geeky things. And one of the geeky things was wrestling.
Okay.
So we would do a podcast full of geeky stuff, and then myself and Andrew would do wrestling. And then lack of interest meant that the main podcast stopped, but we were still enjoying the wrestling side of things, and people were listening, which surprised me because I knew very little at that point. So I think that might have been the charm, was I was able to sort of discover things at a nice rate. Now I consider myself to know a reasonable amount about British wrestling, quite a lot about British wrestling. And the podcast was being listened to, it was being enjoyed, we were enjoying doing it, we're getting good feedback, we're getting invited to shows, we're getting lots of interviews with promoters, with wrestlers themselves, and it was just going really, really nicely.
So at this time, it was you, Andrew, and was the tribal chief Stephen doing it as well?
He was indeed, yes. Stephen's an awesome guy. He brings everyone together. But through family commitments, he wasn't able to get involved as much as he likes. He still gets involved. He still sends us bits and pieces. And we still consider him part of the team because he is, bless him. We love him to bits.
So how instant was your chemistry with Andrew? Because he told me that it was very instant. I'm curious to know from your perspective.
Yeah, very much so. I respected his knowledge and his experience, and he appreciated the fact that I can BS and fill quite easily.
Yeah.
I've been a DJ for 25 years, so I'm used to talking on a microphone. I'm a local councillor, so I have to do a lot of speaking in front of people, so it's never bothered me filling time. So it gives him a chance to concentrate on having all the technical side of things there, while I can just try and keep the entertainment side going.
How different is your on-camera chemistry to your off-camera?
Absolutely the same, 100%. There's no airs and graces, nothing put on. With the exception of we were interviewing Jade, not Jade. I'll have to remember the lady's name in a second. And Andy put on a bit of a heel persona to my face persona for that. That's the only time we've ever done that.
Did it go over well, or did it go down like a lead balloon?
It went over well, and it was fun to do. But one of the reasons that we've been so lucky getting the people to come on and be interviewed, and one of the reasons that we get all of the wrestling companies come on and let us interview them, is because the whole point is not to focus on ourselves, it's to focus on British wrestling, to put across how important British wrestling is, how good it is, and what people do. So it's not something we'll be doing on the regular. It was literally just a one-off ahead of this show.
Okay. I am curious to know, as a DJ and someone that's comfortable with public speaking because of your lines of work, was there any transferable skills that you used for YouTube?
Transferable skills. No, basically just confidence. And that is what a lot of people do struggle with. And I have no problems with making myself look stupid. Sometimes I do it by purpose. Sometimes I do it by accident, but I have no problems with it. And I don't worry about what people think about how I am. So I think the only transferable skill would be the confidence to just keep chatting. What
about the other way around? Have you found any skills that you now use as a DJ that you picked up from doing YouTube?
Not as a DJ, but as a local counsellor. So one of the things that we've been doing is lots more videos for social media. And I was able to do them before, but now I can hit my times and do a quick speech. I'm used to seeing my face out there, so I can do, "Hi, I'm your local counsellor. I cover this area. We're doing this at the moment. We want you to come along." And because I'm used to seeing it on YouTube and speaking in certain ways, getting my tone right, that's actually been really useful for doing the videos for the local council.
Was that something you expected to happen, or was it like you had to do one of them videos after doing the podcast and you were like, "Wow, that's a skill I picked up and I didn't realise"?
Yeah, very much so. And the fact that it was a bit of a one-take wonder as well, that I hit it all straight away, it was just an absolute bonus.
How many takes did it take you before you started doing the podcast?
A number.
Okay.
A fairly significant number.
Okay. So moving on to the Tea and Tights podcast. I forgot to ask Andrew this question, or I might have, I can't remember. How does the name come about?
The name came about from my amazing wife.
Okay.
She came up with the name, and we were just trying to think of something that was very, very British, very much in keeping with wrestling, but in keeping with being British. And what more could be British than a cup of tea? What more could be wrestling than some tights?
Okay, fair enough. So you mentioned how busy you are with your DJ work, your council work, and also doing a bit on the British indie scene, So how do you balance it all? What have you put in place to maybe avoid burnout and stuff like that?
I have ADHD. I am diagnosed with ADHD, and I find that having multiple things to keep my attention is very, very helpful. And being able to do lots of things keeps my brain working well, that and lots of caffeine. So I'm also training to be an electrician.
Jeez.
Yeah. I went back to college. I hit 40 and thought I need to get a career. So I'm training to be an electrician at the moment as well. Timings wise, it's just a case of there's many hours in the day. And that's a reason that I don't watch as much wrestling as Andy. Andy does a lot of the reviews of the shows. He manages to keep up with Rev Pro, with WXW in Germany, with Passion Pro, with a lot of the indie companies in the UK, and he does really great reviews of them. I tend to review shows that I go to see live. I tend to watch Progress a lot because I really enjoy the Progress out, but I watch quite a bit of ICW as well. But Andy does much more of the reviews, and I tend to be just the ones that I go to see live. Because we're both based miles away from each other. I'm down in Hertfordshire.
You're not far from me then.
I'm in Letchworth Garden City, hence the lovely thing behind me.
I know exactly where you are. I don't want to say where I am fully, but I'm in Essex. So
I used to live in Essex for a little while. And Andy lives up in Middlesbrough. So we tend to sort of see each other a couple of times a year, tend to go to wrestling shows together when we do.
He said this when I had him on, yeah.
And then, it's good fun. So as far as timing goes, the trick is to have a bloody good calendar.
Yeah.
And a very good wife who tells me when I'm doing things.
Did she just cough in the background as if to be like,
Yes, she just coughed in the background.
Okay. I thought she did, and I was like, okay, fair enough.
Yes.
So, if you did start to feel burned out on one of the things that you were doing, we'll stick with the podcast, and you decided you wanted to step away, would you feel sort of like look, I've got to continue because of the platform we've been given and for Andy's sake, or would you feel comfortable stepping away?
No, I wouldn't, because I'm committed. And this is something that Andy's put so much effort into as well. There have been times when between us, one or the other of us hasn't felt 100%, hasn't felt able to do it, and then we just do it as a solo show. So that's worked very well. There have been a couple of times where I've not been available, where he's brought in Jameis Mooney, who is one of the American guys from Body Slam.
He seems to do a bit of everything. He's been on my show a few times.
He's a nice guy. So no, the Tea and Tights will go on no matter what. But the wonderful thing is, because we can do it as a one-man show, we can break it down, step away, give each other some space, give each other some time off.
You talked about doing it as a one-man show. If, for whatever reason, you did have to do it permanently as a one-man show, if, say, Andy stepped away or for whatever reason, would you want to, or would it be like, okay, I'm going to bring this to
Andy. Andy is the brains. Andy is the one that sorts everything out. Andy is all of that. I am literally just a face who is good at knowledge. I have learnt my way around the British scene. I have made some amazing friends, and no, it couldn't go on without Andy. He is the brains and the heart of the operation. I'm just the mouth.
What? You sound very self-deprecating, so I can imagine what your answer is going to be. What if you got so busy and it had to go on without you? Do you think it would work?
Yes. Yeah, Andy would easily be able to get somebody else to do it. But I don't think I can step away from it. I enjoy it too much. I love following what's happening in the scene. And at the moment, we're in such an amazing position. We have got literally hundreds of brilliant British wrestlers. We started doing a list of wrestlers so that we could go over them, and it was just like, it kept going and going and going on the independent scene. And now with the closure of NXT UK and the return of some of the biggest names that British wrestling has had in years, we're going to have an absolute rush of amazing matches coming onto the scene. It's a really exciting time to be out watching shows.
You brought up the closure of NXT UK, something me and Andy discussed, because I think we recorded the episode the day NXT announced their closure. I can't remember off the top of my head. I shouldn't have really led with that. But how you brought up how it might affect the indie scene for the better. But if we skew negative for a little while, do you think there'll be any downsides?
No, I genuinely don't. The only downsides is for the performers themselves, because they have lost a guaranteed paycheck. And that is awful. I feel so sad for anyone that's lost a job. It really is a bad thing. They will have lost their weekly paycheck. They will be having to look at going back into full-time work as well as wrestling. So I feel incredibly sorry for them. I know that on a professional point of view, they're going to have the opportunity to step up and wrestle a lot of people they haven't been able to before. I know they're going to be able to draw bigger money than they have done before because of who they are and what they've done. So, no, I don't think there are negatives to the British wrestling scene from having these new people come out there. only to themselves. And I hope that they all manage to step forward and find themselves in happy places, earning lots of money.
I fully agree with you. One thing I am curious to know, because you talked about how big the indie British wrestling scene was, even when NXT UK was a thing. Do you think it's a bit of a misnomer that, and a narrative put out there by dirt sheets and maybe WWE themselves, that the British wrestling scene was destroyed by NXT UK?
No, definitely wasn't. There was an effect. There was definitely an effect because we lost a huge number of the biggest draws. It just meant people had to step up. And people have. And we've got a much younger crop of wrestlers that are at the point of headlining shows. And it's given them more of an opportunity. Because those big established names that were headlining the shows have moved on, we've now had this whole new crop come through. And they've become the names on the show. Cara Noir, one of the biggest names coming out of the UK, he's now heading to Japan. Chris Ridgway is heading to Japan. Chris Ridgway is already the Noah Junior Heavyweight Champion. We've got Just Joe Lando, who's one of the CPF boys. He's just done a brilliant tour of America. Mariah May's just done a tour of America. So we've got all of our indie stars that are starting to take over and get the worldwide acclaim that some of the guys that signed for NXT UK had. And now they're going to be able against those guys as well. It's just going to be phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about a little bit where you wouldn't step away and stuff like that. But what is your routine when it comes to podcasting day? Because you're so well spoken. Is that like how you are in your... I always call it civilian life. That's so weird. But you know what I mean, don't you? Like, because this is a very weird line of work to explain to someone that doesn't understand it, isn't it? So
I'm very lucky. Like I said, I'm used to speaking on a microphone. As I've mentioned, I do a lot of work. My original jobs and my first sort of line of work was luxury jewellery and watches. I used to sell very high-end jewellery and very high-end watches in London and Cambridge. So I'm used to having to speak in a certain way, how to hold myself in a certain way. And that has worked well. I've got a voice that resonates nicely for podcasts.
Do you have a podcast voice? Because I spoke to a good friend of mine that has a podcast, and he said for about an hour after he talks, he'll be talking in his podcast voice. Is that something you have? I
don't. I do have a DJ voice, but I don't have a podcast voice. Podcasting, that is literally just me.
Okay.
DJing, it tends to be far louder and cheesier. Podcasting is just normal me.
Okay. So we'll do a two-part question there, really. What is your routine on podcast days to get into the zone to do a recording with Andrew? And then, actually, I'll ask you the second part once you've elaborated.
Andrew always prepares everything for us. He has a script, not a script, but he's got a list of points that we'll go over.
It's normally notes, he was saying to me.
Yeah. So we'll have news notes, then we'll have a list of the upcoming shows for the week and anything else that we're going to talk about. And then we just riff from there. He's very organised, very, very talented at doing that. And that's why I can get away with doing very little. So my general thing on podcast day is make sure I have at least 2 cups of coffee ready. We tend to record Sunday evenings. So we tend to do evening recordings. And then we do interviews at different times. Hopefully later this afternoon, we'll be interviewing an ex-NXT guy. We're just waiting to confirm that.
Don't want to spoil it in case it doesn't happen, or...
I'm going to take the risk. Hopefully we're interviewing Eddie Dennis later.
Oh, I will say, like, we'll know by the time this goes out, because this is going to be, not to toot my own horn, I've got content for a couple of weeks. So this is going to be in the can for a couple of weeks, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely fine.
So I hope you guys get that one. I'm not going to lie. But what is your DJ routine? Like on days that you're DJing?
Load the car, which is like a game of Jenga. So we get the car loaded up, go and set up, make sure the sound checks are all right. And then it's a case of reading the crowd. And that's a big difference with DJing and podcasting. Because podcasting, you're only talking to the person you're talking to. It's one-on-one. It's a standard conversation. DJing, you've got hundreds of people in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
if you're lucky. Sometimes it can be two men and a dog. But if you're lucky, you've got hundreds of people in front of you, and you've got to read that crowd and know what they're enjoying, what they're not enjoying. Because otherwise, they're not going to dance. They're not going to have a good time. So being able to read people is the biggest thing. So as far as getting everything ready with the DJing, it's waiting until the crowd's there and reading that crowd.
Is there a trick to be able to read the crowd before a show? Because I know CM Punk said in an interview that wrestlers you can go by the curtain and then there's a spot and you can read the crowd. Is there something like that in DJing?
Age groups help. You can generally tell by the age of the people there what they're going to enjoy. Honestly, no, it is just a case of watching what things get people going. I did a 40th birthday once and it turned into a drum and bass night.
Really?
That is not what I was expecting to be DJing that night, but it's what I got asked to play by a couple of people. So I put on two sort of very heavy drum and bass songs and everyone went nuts. I was like, right, okay. So as opposed to doing sort of cheesy rock stuff that I thought I was going to be doing, I'm going to be doing a lot of dance music and drum and bass this evening.
Whereas we had a DJ at my friend's wedding a couple of months ago, and I think he played all the cheesy like songs that you thought you'd be playing. And this was someone in their 20s, which I find quite funny.
Weddings, you see, you have specific wedding DJs, and that's just what they do. And they earn hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds a night and play the same shit every night.
No desire to do a wedding DJ then?
I have been a wedding DJ. For quite a few years. I've specialised in weddings, but the difference is I read a crowd. So I'm not just going to play ABBA, then Grease, then Michael Jackson, then the Macarena.
It's like he was there.
Exactly. Whereas if you read the crowd and play what they want, A, the bride and groom are going to be happier, B, the crowd are going to be happier, and C, you're going to get more gigs out of it.
Yeah. It's like he was there. I'm not going to lie. So as we look at wrapping this up, because I do want to be very respectful of your time, we're going to do a very quick segment that I call generic questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before will know this is where I ask my guests their favorite wrestling match, their favorite wrestling pay-per-view, favorite wrestling tag team, favorite wrestling theme song, and favorite wrestling wrestler or superstar of all time. Basically in the hopes, because I'm sure they're questions that they get asked on social media quite regularly, and basically in the hopes that basically they can be like, look, I've answered this. Please go watch this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what's your favorite match of all time?
Probably one that not a lot of people have seen, but it's the one I was there. And it was Close Personal Friends, which is Just Joe Lando, Maverick Mayhew, Callum Newman, and Danny Black, all against each other for Wrestle Carnival.
Ooh.
And you can get that on Wrestle Carnivals on demand. It's absolutely phenomenal. Really recommend that match.
Okay. What about favorite pay-per-view of all time?
Favorite pay-per-view of all time is probably King of the Ring with the Hell in a Cell match.
Well, 98?
I think it was 98.
I think. Why does that speak to you so much?
Because as well as the Hell in a Cell match, which featured Mankind, who is my favourite WWE wrestler of all time, and The Undertaker, who's my other favourite WWE wrestler of all time, just everything at that point was the absolute highlight of the Attitude Era. And it was just the sort of the one pay-per-view I always go back on and think, that was great fun, and I will go back and watch it.
Fair enough. What about your favourite wrestling theme song of all time?
Favourite wrestling theme song? It's going to be Glorious.
Was that your wife in the background again?
That was my wife in the background. And yes, we did have Glorious play at our wedding as well.
Please elaborate on that story if you don't mind.
We actually got married on TV. There's a kids' television program called Marrying Mum and Dad, where the children organise the wedding and the parents have got no idea what's going to happen.
Is it basically Don't Tell the Bride? For the
yes, but nice.
Nicely done.
They did us a music festival. It was amazing. And then at the reception, I'd been toying with the idea of actually having glorious play as I walk down the aisle. Why not? Women get a nice piece of music when they walk down the aisle. Why can't I have glorious? But we had it play at the reception, our first dance, and a lot of people looked very confused, and I didn't care because I was over the moon.
What? I'm curious to know your wife's reaction. Was she like, "Oh, do we have to?"
My wife is a wrestling fan through and through as well, and she was more than happy to have glorious play at the reception.
Oh, okay. Because I can imagine like that going like, "Do we have to?" Do you know what I mean? If she wasn't a fan.
No, she was well up for that. You should have heard her reaction when the Hardy Boys came back at the Royal Rumble.
Oh,
WrestleMania.
yeah.
Sorry.
I was gonna say, I didn't want to correct him, but
no, she will correct me. Yes.
Fair enough. Favorite wrestling tag team of all time. That threw me off massively there.
Favorite tag team of all time, Dudley's.
Okay. Favorite, and then finally, why do they speak to you?
All the stuff they did in ECW, the hatred that they could get, the style of work. Then in WWE, they were able to do comedy as well as doing the hardcore style, as well as everything else. Most decorated tag team of all time. Brilliant combination. They worked together so well. Love the Dudleys.
With something I'm always curious to know with my guests' favorites, if they showed up in AEW as a new tag team today, still with the table gimmick, do you think they would work?
100%. 100%. Yeah. They were able to control crowds on a microphone. They were able to incite riots, literal riots. If they were to come again now, they would be just as big as any other team going.
Fair enough. And then as we wrap this up, favorite wrestler or superstar of all time? You hinted at it, but I can please elaborate.
It's a tough one. I think it is going to have to be Mick Foley.
Mm-hmm.
His style was hard hitting. Absolutely loved watching him do everything he did as Cactus. Really enjoyed his work as Mankind. Dude Love was funny in a character, and I've said from the very beginning of the show how much I enjoy wrestling characters, and that's recording. But his writing is brilliant. His novels are fantastic, as well as his biographies. And I just think he's one of the all-round nicest guys that I've ever come across, and I would love to meet him one day. That is very high on my list of people that I would love to meet. I just think Mick Foley comes across as one of the nicest guys ever. And I think I'm going to have to be cheeky and also mention a British wrestler at this point, seeing as I do all the independent British stuff.
That's your gimmick.
It is. I'm going to have to say, at the moment, the wrestler for me in the UK independent scene that everyone needs to look out for is Luke Jacobs. Luke is just having the absolute time of his life at the moment. And time of his life, bearing in mind he's only in his early 20s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he is the Progress Atlas champion. He is the Rev Pro Cruiserweight champion. He is just beating 7 shades out of anyone put in his way.
Fair enough.
Favourite match of the year this year has been him versus Axel Tiska at FNW, and they had an absolute barn burner. Luke Jacobs is definitely my favourite British wrestler at the moment.
Fair enough. So as we wrap this up, the question I end all my interviews on is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general, we're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of very weird way. So what is one piece of content from your good self that you would like the good people to check out? And then what is one that you're like, if you could avoid that, I would appreciate it?
Any episode of TN Tights, because they're all fantastic episodes. I would love people to go along and watch. As far as bad things I wouldn't want on there. Some of my DJ sets when I was younger were appalling. I had no confidence whatsoever. I would literally hide behind the desk to do announcements that I didn't have to speak. So luckily, you would only have seen them if you were there, but please forget them.
Fair enough. And as we wrap this up, where can the good people find you on social media and your content in wherever it is?
I'm on Twitter at Big Daddy Dan TT, and you can find all of our Tea and Tight stuff on bodyslam.net's YouTube page, and we're also available on Spotify.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talk Trash. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talk Trash. As Dan said, make sure you follow bodyslam.net wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube for my show with Cassidy Haynes, the Wrestle Watch Pod, and follow the Wrestle Watch Pod on Twitter. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.